Hey everybody, it's Eric. Have you ever made a costly mistake? My guess is you have, but I bet it was not a $100 million mistake. Several weeks ago, when we were thinking about going to $100 million and we had just kind of announced it to the world, and maybe even after a couple of podcast episodes had come out where we were like, yeah, we're going to do it at $100 million, I thought, well, what's it going to actually take to get to $100 million? Like, how much do we have to sell? How fast do we have to grow? If we're going to try to do this by 2030, what does that really mean as far as growth? Are we talking about tripling the size of the company every single year, doubling the size? And so what I did is I sat down and I created a complex spreadsheet. And in the spreadsheet, I said, well, at the time we're at $1 million. We're a little bit more now, but then it was $1 million and we had to get to $100 million. And we had 11 years, and I broke that up into months. And so I figured, well, if we increase by this much every single month, and since it's recurring revenue, it should add on top of itself. So let's say we bring in, say, $1,000 in the first month. Well, in the second month, we bring in $1,000 again. Now we're up to $2,000. And in the third month, we bring in $1,000 a third time. Now we have a total of $3,000. There's a cumulative effect over time. And we had 11 years times 12 months, and that's too much math for me to do right now. I don't know, 132? That's close, if not correct. So we had 132 months to actually build up this revenue. So I laid out this big spreadsheet, and I calculated that we needed to bring in an extra $2,600 in new monthly recurring revenue every single week in order to achieve $100 million at the end of that time period. And I actually published that information. I think I did a podcast episode about it, and I was very proud of myself for calculating that. At some point, I went back and I looked at it, and I started to kind of question the logic, and I realized I had made a mistake. I had made a big mistake. What I was doing was I was adding up all of the money that we would have earned between then and 2030. So summing it all up equaled $100 million. That's a lot different than earning $100 million in year 2030, which is really the goal. The goal is not to earn $100 million in the next 11 or 12 years. No. There's a big difference. As a matter of fact, in order to earn $100 million over the next 11 years, what that means is in 2030, we'll be an $18 million company. So think about it this way. Say like $1 million in 2018, $2 million in 2019, $4 million in 2020, et cetera, all the way up to 2030, $18 million. When you add all that up for every single year, that was $100 million. That was the answer I got, and it was wrong. It was a big $100 million mistake. When I realized that and recalculated, the numbers were huge. It was something like, it was so big that I didn't even save the file. It was like $55,000 a week in new revenue, or maybe per month. It was a big, way bigger number than we could achieve. So I realized that model was wrong. I had made a huge mistake. What I also realized is that it's going to be very difficult for us to grow by having a linear amount of new revenue coming in every single week or month. The reality is there's going to be a stacking effect. If we bring in $2,500 per week in new monthly recurring revenue, which is about what we're doing right now, that won't be acceptable in 5 years. In 5 years, it needs to be 10 or 15 or 20,000 a week. The numbers, all the numbers are going to get bigger, including how much we bring in. There's also going to be an inorganic component, buying companies and folding them into Array Digital. This is way more complicated of a situation than I originally anticipated. It's not going to be just bringing in the same amount of money every single week for the next 11 years. Way more complicated. I made a huge mistake. I don't know what the answer is yet, but I know that it's not a steady stream of income. It's going to vary over the years.